The city of Seoul buzzed under the evening light, reflecting the grandeur of its skyscrapers on the pristine glass of corporate buildings. At the top of one of South Korea's largest conglomerates, CEO Kang Ji-ho was wrapping up his meeting with investors, displaying the same cold precision and calculated demeanor that had made him a legend in the business world. His empire, the Kang Group, was synonymous with power, and Ji-ho had never allowed emotions to interfere with his rise. To him, the business world was a battlefield where there was no room for weakness. On the other side of the city, Ha Yoon-ji adjusted her simple blouse before rushing out to work. As a temporary secretary at Kang Group, she knew she couldn't afford to make mistakes. The job was her only chance to help her ailing mother and pay off overdue bills. Ever since her father had passed away, the responsibility of supporting her family had fallen entirely on her shoulders. Despite the exhaustion and hardships, she refused to give up. With a determined sigh, she stepped through the glass doors of the company's imposing headquarters, feeling a shiver down her spine at the thought of the long day ahead. The first encounter between Ji-ho and Yoon-ji happened unexpectedly. The CEO, lost in thought over a risky merger, bumped into her in the hallway. Papers flew into the air, and Yoon-ji, not realizing who was in front of her, muttered a hurried apology as she scrambled to pick them up. Ji-ho, annoyed by the interruption, frowned, but something about her made him pause for a moment longer, his gaze fixed on her delicate face, where a faint blush betrayed her embarrassment. "Do you always walk around without watching where you're going?" he asked, his voice deep and authoritative. Yoon-ji looked up and froze. She was standing before the most feared and respected man in the company. Her heart pounded, but not for the right reason. With a quick movement, she handed the papers back to him and bowed formally, wishing she could disappear that very moment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kang. It won't happen again." Ji-ho took the documents, observing her for a second longer than necessary. Something about the way she held herself, despite her obvious nervousness, intrigued him. He was used to seeing employees cower in his presence, but she didn't seem entirely consumed by fear. There was a determined spark in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. However, he brushed the thought aside and moved on, convinced that he would never think of her again. But as he stepped into his office, he realized it was already too late for that. The image of her gathering the papers lingered in his mind, disturbing his flawless routine. Ji-ho shook his head, irritated with himself. He had no time for distractions, much less for feelings. But fate, as always, seemed to have other plans. Kang Ji-ho was a meticulous man. Nothing went unnoticed in his company, and he had always known how to keep his distance from unnecessary distractions. However, in the past few days, his mind seemed to challenge that rule. No matter how much he tried to focus, his attention kept drifting toward one particular employee, Ha Yoon-ji. He caught himself observing her in the office, noticing details that would have otherwise escaped him. The way she bit her lower lip when concentrating on a document, how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the quiet yet determined energy with which she tackled her daily tasks. It made no sense. There was no logic to it, and Ji-ho despised anything that defied logic. Yoon-ji, on the other hand, was doing her best to avoid any unwanted attention. Working at Kang Group was already difficult enough without having to deal with the CEO's intimidating presence. Ever since that encounter in the hallway, she had felt his subtle but constant gaze on her. What did he want? Was he evaluating her? Was she about to be fired? Her heart raced every time he passed by, no matter how hard she tried to ignore him. Fate, however, seemed determined to bring them closer. One afternoon, Yoon-ji was summoned to an emergency meeting with Ji-ho and the other directors. As an assistant, her role was merely to organize documents and take notes, but being in the same room as him was enough to make her uneasy. Throughout the meeting, she felt his piercing gaze on her multiple times, and the nervousness nearly made her jot down the wrong information. When the meeting ended, Ji-ho remained seated, watching her as the others left. Feeling the pressure, Yoon-ji hurriedly began gathering her materials, but his deep voice stopped her. "Ha, Yoon-ji." She turned around slowly, trying to suppress the chill that ran down her spine at hearing her name in his voice. "Yes, Mr. Kang?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Ji-ho observed her for a moment before speaking. as if weighing his words carefully. Do you always work at such a frantic pace? Yoonji blinked, confused. She couldn't tell if that was a criticism or a compliment. I do my best to fulfill my responsibilities. Ji-ho let out a short, unreadable sound, but his eyes said something else. Keep it up. Without waiting for a response, he stood up and walked out of the room. But for Yoonji, it was a warning. He was watching her. And worse, he seemed interested. What did that mean? And why couldn't she stop her heart from beating faster? The following days brought a strange shift in Kang Ji-ho's routine. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't ignore Ha Yoon-ji's presence. Her name surfaced in his mind constantly, and her presence in the office seemed to have an unexpected effect on him. At the company, rumors began to circulate. Subtle glances exchanged. Moments of silence laden with meaning nothing escaped the sharp eyes of the employees. Ji-ho had always been discreet, but even his usual coldness wasn't enough to hide the growing interest he harbored for Yoonji. She, on the other hand, tried to act as if nothing was happening. One evening, Ji-ho stayed late at the office, reviewing an important contract. To his surprise, Yoonji was there as well, organizing documents. The silence between them was thick until he broke the barrier. Do you always stay after hours? Ji-ho asked, without taking his eyes off the computer screen. Yoonji, surprised by the question, looked up. Only when I need to finish something important. Ji-ho finally shifted his gaze toward her. That's admirable. Few people have such dedication. She gave a slight smile but didn't reply. The compliment caught her off guard. For a brief moment, Ji-ho felt an irrational urge to prolong the conversation, to get to know her better, but he restrained himself. However, fate had other plans. At a corporate event, Ji-ho and Yoonji were forced to interact even more. During the dinner, an important investor approached them with a sly smile. Mr. Kang, it seems you've been spending quite a lot of time with your secretary lately. The man's tone was playful, but Ji-ho caught the weight behind his words. Yoonji felt embarrassed, sensing the gazes of some directors on her. Ji-ho noticed her discomfort, and for the first time, he felt a genuine urge to protect her. My employees are competent, and I value those who work hard, he replied in a firm tone. Ji-ho's response made the curious stares disperse, but the damage was done. The next day, Yoonji heard whispers in the hallways. Employees murmured about her and Ji-ho. The rumors reached the board and, inevitably, the Kang family. That night, Ji-ho received a phone call from his mother. Her voice, as cold as ever, sounded like a warning. Ji-ho, I hope these rumors are false. You know what's at stake. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. His heart and his reason waged a battle, but he already knew this wouldn't be an easy fight to win. The tension at Kang Group was palpable. Ever since the rumors about Ji-ho and Yoonji had spread, curious stares and malicious whispers had become frequent. But what truly weighed on Ji-ho was the opposition from the Kang family. That morning, Ji-ho was summoned for a private meeting with his father, Kang Dae-hyun, the founder of the family empire. The meeting took place at the luxurious family residence, far from the prying eyes of the press. His father sat in his leather armchair, fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. So it's true, Dae-hyun said bluntly. You're getting involved with a mere employee. Ji-ho held his ground. He had known this conversation would come sooner or later. I don't see Yoonji that way, he responded calmly. She's an incredible woman. His father let out a cold laugh. That doesn't matter. You have a name to uphold. Kang Group cannot afford scandals. I thought we had raised you better. Ji-ho felt his blood boil, but he controlled his anger. He had spent his life following the family's rules, sacrificing his own emotions for the sake of the company. But now, for the first time, he felt like he didn't want to give in. I won't give up on what I want. Dae-hyun stared at him for a long moment, then picked up a document from the table and slid it toward Ji-ho. If you continue with this absurd idea, you'll be out of the succession. The words hit like a punch. Ji-ho had always known his family was cold and calculating, but he never thought they would go this far. His empire, his position as the heir to Kang Group everything, was on the line. Meanwhile, Yoonji was fighting her own battles. At the office, the gossip had escalated to an unbearable level. Some colleagues avoided her. Others looked at her with disdain. And then came the final blow, a transfer notice to a remote branch. It was clear as day they wanted her gone. That night, Yoonji walked through the streets of Seoul, struggling to hold back her tears. That was when she heard her name. Yoonji. She turned around and saw Jiho approaching her. His gaze was intense, filled with emotion. "We need to talk." She took a deep breath. She knew this wouldn't be easy. Jiho was standing before an impossible choice: love or the company. But deep down, she already knew what his decision would be. The light rain fell over Seoul, creating a curtain of shimmering reflections on the bustling streets. Kang Jiho stood in front of Ha Yoonji, his gaze locked onto hers, as the distant hum of cars and the city faded into the background. He had spent the entire day thinking about his decision, and he knew he could not delay it any longer. "I won't lose you." His voice, firm and unwavering, cut through the silence. Yoonji swallowed hard. Ever since the rumors had begun, her life had spiraled into chaos. She was about to lose her job, her stability, and would forever be remembered as the woman who tried to climb the ranks through the CEO. But more than that, she feared that Jiho would regret his decision, that he would abandon her the moment everything came crashing down. "Jiho, your family will never accept this." Her voice was weak but filled with pain. "I'm being transferred. They want to keep me away from you." He took a step closer, his eyes burning with determination. "Then I'll fight. I won't let them decide my life for me." Yoonji shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "And what if you lose everything? If you lose Kang Group?" Jiho let out a small smile, one that carried both defiance and redemption. "Then I'll start over. But I won't start over without you." That night, Jiho did the unthinkable. The next day, he called an emergency meeting with the company's board, including his father and the most conservative shareholders. With the same composed posture he had always carried, but with a rebellious fire in his eyes, he declared, "I refuse to be controlled by outdated traditions. I know you expect me to marry an heiress, to conform to the standards set by this family, but I've chosen to forge my own path. If that means giving up Kang Group, then so be it." The room fell into immediate shock. Murmurs spread like wildfire. His father stared at him in disbelief before letting out a heavy sigh. "You're willing to throw everything away for a woman?" Jiho met his gaze without hesitation. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm gaining something you never had: freedom." The board was divided, and discussions dragged on for days. But then, something unexpected happened. Some of the board members, those who had always admired Jiho for his strong and innovative leadership, sided with him. Slowly, the pressure against him began to fade. His father realized that fighting his own son could risk a rebellion within the company. And so, against all odds, Jiho managed to keep both his position and his love. But the true victory came the following night when he met Yoonji again. She was waiting for him in the same spot where they had spoken in the rain. When he arrived, his hands trembled as he took hers into his own. "I promised I wouldn't give up. Now, I have a question for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring that sparkled under the glow of the streetlights. "Will you spend the rest of your life with me?" Tears spilled down Yoonji's cheeks, but this time, they were of pure happiness. Without hesitation, she smiled and nodded. "Yes, Jiho. Yes." The golden sun of Seoul bathed the city in its soft light, marking a new beginning. Kang Jiho and Ha Eunji were about to embark on a journey that few had believed possible. After countless battles against societal prejudice and the obstacles imposed by the powerful Kang family, they finally had something they never imagined: freedom to love. The wedding was a discreet yet elegant ceremony. Unlike what was expected of an heir to Kang Group, Jiho rejected a grand, opulent celebration, opting instead for an intimate event surrounded only by close friends and those who truly supported his love for Yoonji. The bride walked down the aisle with a radiant smile, while Jiho waited for her at the altar, his gaze filled with pure admiration. "I never thought I'd get married without it being a business deal," Jiho whispered playfully when she stopped beside him. Yoonji took his hand, her eyes shining. "I never thought I'd marry a billionaire CEO." She let out a soft laugh. "But I guess fate had other plans for us." As they exchanged vows and slipped the rings onto each other's fingers, Ji-ho finally realized that for the first time in his life, he had chosen something not based on strategy or profit, but on happiness. The years that followed brought challenges, but also immense joy. Yoon-ji became a respected figure within the company, not just as the CEO's wife, but as a talented and determined professional. She proved that her place beside Ji-ho was not just out of love, but also out of sheer competence. The Kang family was slow to accept their marriage, but over time, their resistance softened. The family matriarch, who had initially rejected Yoon-ji, shocked everyone when she visited them after the birth of their first child, bringing a small traditional amulet as a gift. The blood of the Kang family runs through this child's veins as well, she said, observing the tiny baby cradled in Yoon-ji's arms. Perhaps I was too quick to judge you. Yoon-ji smiled, gently holding her mother in Law's wrinkled hand. She didn't need full acceptance, just peace, and with time, that became a reality. Ji-ho, on the other hand, had become a different man. He was still the determined, brilliant CEO leading one of South Korea's largest conglomerates, but now there was a lightness in his eyes, a glow of contentment that had never been there before. One night, as he looked at his sleeping wife and the small baby in his crib, Ji-ho felt a peace he had never known. I think in the end, you saved me, Yoon-ji, he murmured, running his fingers gently through her hair. She stirred slightly, opening her eyes with a sleepy smile. I'd say we saved each other. Ji-ho let out a soft laugh, leaning down to kiss her. Yes, they had faced everything and everyone, and yet they had remained strong. And now, they had something no fortune could ever buy, a love that was true and everlasting. The end, or rather, a new beginning.